Well, there you have another episode of Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine by Green Zone Hero. This particular interview is a little over 2 years in the making. We've been playing telephone tag, social media tag, and texting tag just to make it happen. But this is a busy veteran who's been on the front lines helping warfighters on so many different levels. And when he was helping them, he was helping himself. I just want to say that I'm humbled to have Boone Cutler on this episode. You're going to enjoy the story. I am sure you will. And thank you for listening to another episode of Straight Outta Combat.
Your steely-eyed killer shadow in the night. You were born to fight. You gotta light 'em up.
My name is John Krotek, and I want to welcome you to Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine by Green Zone Hero. We're here to honor the wisdom of America's most valuable asset, her combat veterans. We're authentic, we're empowering, we're American.
Save us all before they burn it down.
Our guest today on Straight Outta Combat Radio is one of the most well-known veteran ambassadors and advocates to be found anywhere on the planet. We've been playing telephone, social media, and email tag for a couple of years now. So to say that I'm super stoked to finally have him on the show is like a serious understatement. Boone Cutler's story and his list of great deeds is as long as the Declaration of Independence. And I'm not joking. There's a lot of material here. I'm going to briefly go through his bio, but we really want to get to Boone and hear his story. But here it goes. Boone, as you all know, and if you don't know, is an author, a columnist, a music video director, and a Warfighter Rights leader. He holds the distinguished honor of being the first nationally recognized radio talk show personality who is also a combat veteran from these wars, the current war, actually. Boone's message is pretty simple. America has lost faith in what they used to believe in. We're the heroes of Hollywood. America has become disgusted with the political climate of today, so the only place to turn and trust for leadership is the warfighter. And he's been doing a damn good job of that since its outset. He began writing his Iraq War-inspired autobiographical account of what he experienced, titled Voodoo in Sadr City, during his combat tour in Iraq, and completed it during a 2-year recovery from wartime injuries at Walter Reed Army Medical Center during the neglect scandal of 2007. After his recovery, and a lot of you know this, he began to see a major void in the warfighter community. So he decided to approach Fox News affiliate 99.1 FM Talk with the concept of a new show that focused on national, international, and social events based on the warfighter's perspective. Several years ago, 8 years ago already. So he's grown up. His show, Tipping Point with Boone Cutler, was launched in 2011, providing a weekly platform for Boone's raw paratrooper, no-holds-barred style. His show quickly becoming a hit over the airwaves and online with an audience of fellow warfighters and curious mainstream American listeners. That's fantastic. In June of 2014, Tipping Point with Boone Cutler began its partnership with KNEWS K-News 107.3 FM in Reno, Nevada, airing for 3 hours every Saturday. Freaking phenomenal, man. In 2010, Boone founded the National Warfighter Symposium to bring much-needed attention to warfighter issues, such as post-combat life. We all know about that transition, particularly the alarming rates of warfighter suicide and homelessness. Again, Boone Cutler, cutting edge, on the front lines, on the battlefield, and back home too. America currently loses at least 23 warfighters, 22 veterans, and 1 active duty a day to suicide. This is a number that Boone has made his mission to combat with his creation of the Spartan Pledge. Warfighters promise not to take their own lives and instead vow to find a new mission to help one another. He has chosen GallantFew.org, founded by a U.S. Army Ranger, Carl Monger, and everybody knows him, as his signature charity. In 2012, Boone was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease, secondary to a blast injury in Iraq. He is currently starting and has been working on a campaign for more awareness on this issue in the warfighter community. In fact, something pretty cool. In the 2012-2013 term, Governor Sandoval of Nevada appointed Boone Cutler himself to the Interagency Council on Veterans Affairs. Boone has been very involved and continues to be involved with the arts after seeing first the healing effects of music therapy. I also know he's involved with CBDs and hemp and all that, and we'll get to that. He also works as music video producer director for Redcon One Music Group, which is pretty cool. He's going to tell us about that. 2014, Boone became the national spokesperson for the Warfighter Rights movement, whose mission is to end post-traumatic stress disorder phobia that results in discrimination against warfighters in employment, housing, and in the judicial process. Boone also spoke at the 2016 World Peace Conference. So I got to say, welcome to Straight Outta Combat Radio, Boone, and thank you for being here. And I'm glad you're here, and so are millions of others who have heard you and have followed your distinguished career, not only in the Army, but outside of the Army. So thanks for being here, Boone.
Hey, brother, thanks for having me. I'm listening to my own bio as you're reading it, and I'm like, wow, who's that guy? He's been kind of busy. But, I'm just Boone, man. I'm happy to be here with you, brother, and I'm happy to talk about whatever we need to talk about. The warfighter community has a lot of issues going on, and these issues are constantly ebbing and flowing. And guys like yourself that are out there keeping your finger on the pulse, making sure people know what's going on, man, that's really good. That's what counts. And I think it's how we make sure we are moving forward and are not getting stuck. And you're right. I don't have anything in my bio about CBD, about cannabinoids, stem cells. There's been a lot of stuff that's gone on the last few years that's not in that bio that have been the next frontier per se on what the warfighter community is doing and needs to do.
Couldn't have said it any better than you just did, Boone. I know this show is not about us as individuals, but this particular episode is about you and your story. And, man, tell us what molded Boone Cutler. What was your childhood like? What was the home life like? What did you listen to in music? I mean, what got you to the Army? Tell us about that, man.
Well, what got me to the Army was the Panama invasion primarily. I grew up in the military. My father was in the Marine Corps. My grandfather was in the Marine Corps. My grandfather was a prisoner of war in World War II. He was captured on Guam December 8th, 1941. It is recalled through your history that the Pearl Harbor attack was on December 7th. So he captured the day after the Pearl Harbor attack. And he spent the entire war in captivities. Him and the guys he was captured with were the longest held prisoners of war in World War II. And that shaped me a lot, and my father serving in the Marine Corps and serving in Vietnam, that shaped me a lot. These things, it was these family points of, hey, this is what you do. And when you get older, this is the way you conduct yourself. And it's kind of like, family business stuff. So when I was about 18 years old, I left home when I was about 17. And when I was 18 years old, the Panama invasion happened. And it felt like a cue, there was the cue for me to go spend my time and to sign the line, take the oath and do my part. And so, that's what I did. So I joined the Army, and that's kind of how I grew up. And that's why I joined the Army.
So did you go to Benning? You were 11 Bravo right off the bat?
Yep, went to Benning, did the 11 Bravo thing for my first enlistment, and then after that, I reclassified to 37 Foxtrot psychological operations.
So what was, so you had this great background. Thank you for sharing that story about your granddad. I mean, that's pretty freaking phenomenal that he even survived. So it's definitely good stock you're coming from, brother. Let me ask you this: when you got the basic training at Benning, was it a culture shock or was it just second nature to you?
I wouldn't say it was culture shock at all. I think one of the most interesting things is, and I've stayed in contact or reestablished contact with one of my drill sergeants from Fort Benning. His name is Drill Sergeant Dimitrov. I went to go see him actually earlier this year in Michigan. And awesome. He had a party, like a retirement party, and so I went out to Michigan and saw him and got to hang out with him and got to tell some stories, and it was kind of cool. But he had been in the Marines before he joined the Army. And I had joined the Army, and my family had been in the Marine Corps. And I thought that because you're young, you want to do something a little bit different. And my whole thing is I wanted to jump out of airplanes, and I couldn't get a contract in the Marine Corps to go jump out of airplanes at that time. And when I heard the news when we invaded Panama, it wasn't that America had invaded Panama. It was, the news came on that said the 82nd Airborne Division has just jumped into Panama. And when I heard those words, that was like, that was my calling. That's where I wanted to go. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to jump out of airplanes. And so the Army gave me a contract that I could be airborne. And that's what I wanted to do. So I go to Benning, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm in the Army. I'm away from the Marine Corps. It's a little bit of a different culture, and sure as all could be, my drill sergeant had been in the Marine Corps. So as I'm getting off the cattle car at Benning, and as I'm getting off, I see this drill sergeant standing there, but he's got the EGA, the Marine Corps Eagle Globe and Anchor. He's got this Death Before Dishonor tattoo on his arm. And I'm thinking, how the hell did I join the Army and still end up with a guy who was in the Marine Corps as my drill sergeant? So I could not escape the Marine Corps. There's always been that influence there. But yeah, I got the Benning, and it wasn't really culture shock for me, I don't think, as much as a lot of other guys. It was different. There was definitely, you definitely knew you were going along for the ride, which is the way that it should be. And you were going to get that military education you signed up to do and to get. And it was good, man. It was really good. I think it was the right thing for me at the right time. And I was proud to be there.
Awesome. So you went to Benning for jump school?
Yeah, I went to Benning for basic AIT, which is OSIT training, one station unit training, and then for airborne school. Yeah.
So how did you feel, man? So you're going, obviously karma had something to do with the Marine drill sergeant showing up, but how did you feel when you got those jump wings? And did any of your family come see you when you graduated?
Yeah, my father came out, and he actually pinned my blood wings on me at Benning. And it was a very proud moment for me. So it was a proud day, and he was proud and I was proud. And yeah, he came out and pinned my wings and got to see the ceremony, and it was good, man. It was really good.
Very cool. So where did you go to your first duty station? Was there anything going on at that time, or was it just business as usual?
First duty station, I shipped over to Germany, and I was I started out in of all places. I mean, I joined the military because I wanted to jump out of airplanes at the 82nd Airborne Division. They sent me to a leg unit in Germany that's guarding a Pershing missile. So I mean, it couldn't have been further from the infantry at the time. But that at that time they were closing down those types of units in Europe, and so I wasn't there very long. So I was at that 2-4 infantry in Neu-Ulm, Germany, which was a fantastic place to be as a young 18-year-old man, just living on the economy. And it wasn't isolated at all, where our barracks was literally right there in the city. And we'd go downtown and we could hang out with the locals, and it was beautiful. I mean, the area was beautiful. Germany was beautiful. The people were beautiful. The beer was fantastic. The food was amazing. I mean, really, it was just a wonderful experience for an 18-year-old man, and on his own for the first time, and really just kind of taking it all in, absorbing everything. Because we could get in a car, and we could rent cars even then, and
awesome.
Over there, and we'd rent cars, and we'd drive to different countries. I went everywhere, in Europe, and enjoyed that. I really enjoyed taking in the culture and being a part of, taking advantage of being on that continent and seeing things and enjoying the food and trying to stay out of trouble and all that. And then the unit shut down, and they shipped us out to, the unit designation went from 2-4 infantry to 1-4 infantry, and they shipped us to Hohenfels, Germany, the 7th Army Training Center in Hohenfels, Germany. So I became Op 4 in Europe, and I did that for a little while, and that was good too. I mean, the amount of training was pretty intense. There was a lot of training for anybody who's been to Hohenfels, being private party or permanent party in Hohenfels, Germany. There's a lot of training. You spend a lot of time in the box, and that was good. I mean, as far as training goes, I don't think you really couldn't get more. So it was happening, and it more force on force. It was constant force on force because it was the opposing forces, the Op 4. And so that was really good. And then finally, after I left there, I ended up at the 82nd, and I was in the 2nd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the 82nd Airborne Division. And that's home. I mean, I've served in other military units since then, but Fort Bragg is definitely, that's the place that feels like home to me. And I loved it. That was great. Good time.
What year was that, Boone, when you obviously the time in Europe sounds like it was pretty magical besides all the training taking place, but what year did you come back to the States? Was that before 9/11, before 9/11?
Oh yeah, man. We're talking, that was 1992.
So you're back on Bragg. Some people call Fayetteville, Vietnam, and a lot of, obviously, it's the mecca of the 82nd Airborne, a distinguished class of warfighter, paratroopers, and 502nd, which has been around since World War II. And so,
no, I was in the 505th.
505th. That's another one, though, that's been around for a while. So, you guys are doing your thing. You're making a career out of it, or what's going on with you then?
At that time, I was on the fence, and I will say one thing that has changed that I've seen, and there has been obviously trends and ebbs and flows in that process too. But at that time, when you joined the military and you were a young man, you're on your first enlistment. It was seen, and this is. This was not correct, but the perception was that, okay, if you do your first enlistment, you got your college money, you go out and then you go get a life, because if you're in the military, you're not really having a life. That was perception. It was totally wrong, and it was completely wrong from how I saw things. But that was the perception, and I fed into that, and so I was not really hot on re-enlisting, but I considered it, and I was going to re-enlist, but then I got a job offer about the same time I was in that re-enlistment window, and I got a good job offer to get out of the military, and so I ended up getting out. But it was interesting. And this is probably something that's not spoken about enough, and I think there's probably good reason for that, but there's also good reason to speak about it, and that is, when I joined the military, I literally went down to go see my recruiter to join the military the day after the Panama invasion. And when you talk to folks and they say, hey, why'd you join the military? And then the response is, oh, I want to serve my country. Oh, I was doing it for the college money. Also, I didn't really do it for any of that stuff. I did use the college money. I went to the police academy and I did all that stuff. But when I joined the military, I really, 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 if I'm honest with myself, and I've had 3 breaks in service and gone back, so I kind of can validate that. And I think there's a lot of guys out there like me that, I joined the military because I really wanted to know if I had the military goes to war. That's what they do. I came from a family that had been, had served in war. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to serve in war. I wanted to go to war. I wanted to see if, I could win a fight to the death. I wanted to know if, what a gun battle was like. I wanted to know that stuff. I really did. But I wasn't honest with it because for one, people didn't speak that way. And though it was still an all volunteer military, there were a lot of the old timers who had come up underneath the guys who had been in Vietnam, and there was a negativity about that quote unquote warfighter mentality. If you had a warfighter mentality, they called that a lifer, and a lifer was had a negative connotation. And so guys kind of pushed away from that. But, in finding my own identity, I think that, and if I was honest with myself, why I joined the military, I think I joined for the same reason a lot of people join. And I guess I'm speaking to them that, it's okay to have wanted to join the military because you wanted to be a war fighter. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think that, especially in today's society that's so politically correct. I mean, Brad and Angelina had this young child that wanted to be raised outside its born gender, And everybody was like, oh, this is fantastic. Look how open they are with this child. The child can choose and has decisions. And everybody was just fine with them doing that. But you say, hey, I identify as a warfighter. Oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. You can't do that. That's bad. And it's not bad. So, these things changed over the years. And then after 9/11, of course, there came a time that it was okay for warfighters to just be warfighters, and they weren't looking to be lifers, and they weren't there for the college money. They were there for the fight.
Well, it's interesting that you point that out, and based on the work that you've done, if anybody reads the bio, Boone Cutler, you can basically read into there that there's a higher purpose than just getting college money or serving your country. And I got to tell you that I feel you, brother, because, I wanted to find out if I had the medal. Now, there was nothing going on when I went in. And the college fund back when I was in was 2, 3, and 4 year enlistment. So I went in for 3 years, got the college fund. But the minute the first Gulf War broke out, I went down. I'd already gotten out like you. I went down and re-enlisted. I tried to get back in to go to the first Gulf War. And what I ended up doing was going into an Army Reserve Artillery unit as an NBC NCO. And we got deployed to Hurricane Andrew. But, I feel you on that. And that is something that a lot of guys, I don't know if they're scared to admit it or, they've come out more, but that's what service people do. They fight wars. And I'm a non-combat veteran, which I think gives me an advantage on the show because I don't have to one up Boone Cutler. I can get Boone Cutler's story in a raw way that helps the overall mission. So I thank you for pointing that out, that people go in the military for whatever reasons they might say on the surface, but it's a job that can get rough at times, if that's what I hear you saying.
It is a job that can get rough at times, but I think there's a lot of men out there, and if they're honest with themselves, they do want to know, can they win a fight to the death? Can they be a warrior? Can they really, really do that? When their head hits the pillow at night, that question has crossed their mind more than a few times, and they're not very honest about it because in today's world, they don't want to be judged or anything. But I do not, on any level, believe it to be uncommon for men to want to know in their heart of hearts if they can be a warrior. I believe that it's natural. I believe it's innate. And I don't think they should shy away from that.
Definitely an awesome viewpoint because I think you're right. And, I had the same conversation with a fellow out on the West Coast. We were talking about the chivalric code and what the chivalric code, around the 11th century, a code for men, warriors, how to conduct themselves. But there's a feminine part to it too. But I think number 6 or 7, Boone, is like, show the enemy no quarter. And that used to be a code of honor for men, 1,000 years ago. So I like the way you phrase that because it's true. And if a man's being honest with himself, you do at a core level want to know if you have what it takes to be a warrior. So thank you for pointing that out. I mean, that's pretty cool. And that's just the way it is. We were born men and that's what we do. So that being said, you had just mentioned 9/11. Tell us about 9/11. So were you out when 9/11 kicked off, so to speak?
Yeah. When 9/11 kicked off, I was out, and then, 9/11 happened and I went back in. It was pretty easy to get back in. I literally called the unit I had been in and I just asked them, hey, are you guys hot? And they said, yeah, we're hot. I said, okay, well, give me a paragraph and line number. And anybody who's been in the military understands that just basically means, let me have the code I need to put on some paperwork and I can get back in. And so they gave me a paragraph and line number, which is a slot in the unit. And they gave me my slot and I came back in and started training and deployed to Iraq in 2005.
So that was right before the surge.
Well, 2005, 2006, yeah, it was before the surge. For me, because of the timeline, it doesn't feel like it was right before the surge. But yeah, technically it would have been, it would have been that.
So tell us about that first deployment, whatever you want us to know about it. And what was it like? What were you guys doing?
Well, in 2005, 2006, I was stationed in Sadr City, Iraq, and it was a lot of war. It was a lot of war. And, I have a lot of respect for the guys that served in that area before I was there and after I was there. And there is that connection, guys that chew on the same dirt and all of Iraq, there was a lot of stuff going on. And it was, one of the things I could say that they try to tell the story in movies, but they really can't get it right, in my opinion. I don't think they'd ever be able to get it right, but and that's the closeness that you have with the people you're with that are going through the same shit and that are fighting the same battles and dealing with the enemy, and you're taking care of each other. The closeness that you have with each other is, to me, it far outweighs the positivity of that, far outweighs any negativity of combat. And that's the other thing. Yeah, I don't think people realize, because I don't know how they would, but, understanding, there's something called the human condition. Well, within that human condition, you have relationships. And as part of those human condition relationships, the relationships you develop in combat situations, I think are truly, truly phenomenal. I don't think there's anything stronger. They're just phenomenal relationships.
Can you think of one instance, maybe, or a couple, without rehashing anything that might be troublesome, but can you think of anything that happened in Iraq? I know you were injured there, but that just stands out in your mind like, holy shit, this is the real deal. We're here and we're getting the job done. Or is there anything like that points out in your mind where it just seems so surreal that it was real?
There's definitely those things. I guess are you asking me, like, okay, it's one thing to want to go to war, but then all of a sudden you wake up in the middle of a firefight and you're like, holy moly. So this is what it's really like. This is pretty intense. That definitely happened. Getting shot at was a common, very, 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 very common experience in Sadr City. And the thing about that city was that, the Mahdi militia could lock it down. And they could go toe to toe at any time. You really almost felt like you were a prisoner inside that city. You were always surrounded. They always outnumbered. And when they wanted to pop off, they would pop off. And when they did, you were literally in a 360 degree. You were on a 360 degree firing range, and bullets were going both ways. And it could get like that. They could turn off all the lights in the city, and the next thing you know, you're being ambushed. And the ambush is there. We rolled through an ambush one night. It was like 8 clicks. Who the hell can organize something like that? It's there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of people there that at the time that were willing to go gun to gun. It happened, and yeah, I don't know what to say.
What kept you focused? Tell me what kept you focused, and all that nonsense going on. You guys are there on mission. Was the esprit de corps, were you guys just like gung ho? And, what kept you focused, man?
What kept me focused was I made it personal for me, made it personal. My feeling of fighting the Mahdi militia and fighting them for the things that they did was personal to me. It wasn't, it was more than a job. It did become personal. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I'm just telling you what happened. But, when you would see the things for those listening, the way the militia would work is it was very mafioso-esque, meaning they were very much into controlling the people, and they would do horrific things to their own people to keep them under control. And so there was a battle going on the whole time, which was, on my side, I was looking at promoting empowerment. So the people that were being tortured, abused, the people that did not know what liberty was, that did not understand what freedom was. For me, it was getting those people motivated to fight for themselves. And on the other side of the battle was the militia, who was, keeping these people very afraid, very scared, and they had their objectives to do that, to make sure they would not work with us. So that's where the battle was. The battle was over the populace. Who could influence the populace to meet the objectives they were trying to meet as a military organization. And so for me, that was personal, that was very personal to me.
Did you see any changes taking place? Did you feel effective? Did you see that transformation take place where, we heard about Vietnam, the hearts and minds, we've read about that, but did you see any successes like that taking place?
Sure, I did. But it was never on a grand scale, but, there were successes where, we had successes where members of the Iraqi army that were, by day they were in the Iraqi army, by night they were Mahdi militia. There was a segment that was doing both jobs. And at that time, in order to get a job in Sadr City as an Iraqi police officer or the Iraqi army, you had to have a letter from the Mahdi militia to get that job. And so the populace and they were good jobs. They were good government jobs. But that's how the militias took over the governments, is they would be able to control the hiring, be able to control, how many people got hired for certain government jobs. And you couldn't get those jobs unless you were basically kissing the militia's ass and they gave you a letter of recommendation and you paid for the jobs. You basically had to bribe people and give them a letter of recommendation. Then you got that kind of job. But not everybody within those organizations was also a member of the militia. So, getting, say, Iraqi army troops that were not members of the militia to actually fight other Iraqi army troops or Iraqi police that were members of the militia and getting them to engage each other, those are significant victories when you're in those environments, or being able to have a mukhtar, that, an elder in an area who's working for you and basically telling on the militia and explaining how things are being done and who's doing the influence and who the shot callers are and how to get to them and things like that. Just getting them to cooperate with you was a victory. It's interesting, but a victory over there is if they tell someone to go set up an IED on American troops and you've done your job, a victory is they will set it up poorly. And now a lot of people will be like, well, wait a minute, they're still setting it up on you. Yeah, because they're coerced, and there's, not all of them, but some of them are very much coerced, and they don't want to be a part of this whole thing. They just want to go on with their lives. So if you can establish enough influence with a person who gets told to set up an IED, well, they're still going to do it. But if they do it poorly, well, that's a good day. That's
an excellent viewpoint. It's something, the way you described, seemed like a hopeless situation with people playing both sides. But, and like you said, incremental, maybe not on the grand scale, but something as significant as setting up a poorly devised IED where it won't hurt and maim or kill people is certainly a victory. And even though it's actually, Boone, with all due respect, man, that's a grand scale, brother, because the work that your buddies and you did actually saved lives, despite the casualties and all of the confusion. That, to me, brother, is a monumental freaking victory. And if you've done that 50 times, man, you saved 50 lives or more. So kudos to the work that you guys did over there. I mean, that means a lot, man. Yeah, that's great work to you, brother. Tell us, I know you wrote the book when you were convalescing back home in the States, but can you tell us anything about the injury? What was going on that day?
Well, that day was we'd gotten off mission at night. We always did missions at night, and it was just better to do it that way. So I would always wake up. We usually come in, from a mission about 02, 03, 04, about that time frame. And I do the situation report, kick that up to higher. And then it was, get some chow, go to sleep, and then get some chow. And the next morning I had my guys on the team had said, one of the guys had said, hey, I'm going to go hit the range tomorrow morning. Some other guys are going to be on the range too. And so I was like, okay, yeah, go do that. And so I just got up the next morning, like anything else. I went over to the Haji shop to make a phone call. I think I got something to eat. I don't remember, because I do remember I was at the Haji shop when the rounds started coming in, and I was at the Haji shop and mortars started coming in on the base, and meaning they were shooting at us, and they were launching mortars on us. The report on one of the first mortars was at the range, and the base we were on was very, very small. So it wasn't hard to determine where it was hitting. So the report on the first round was over by the range, and so where my guys were, where one of my guys was. And so I took off out of the Haji shop, and when I took off out of the Haji shop and I was running over to the range to go check on Myers, more rounds were coming in, and one got a little bit too close for comfort and rang my bell, and that was the beginning of a whole lot of problems for me. And it wasn't something that was so significant that, I was missing body parts and I needed to be medevaced out, but it was significant enough that, it had rung my bell, and I thought I was okay. And I felt like I was okay. I mean, like I said, I wasn't missing any body parts, and I thought if I was hurt, I should have been missing body parts, and I wasn't. So, we kind of drove on from that, and I started to feel the effects of it pretty immediately. Like we were talking about doing the situation reports, I was the one that would put the sit reps together after each mission, but then I would bring the guys. We would basically go over the situation report together. So if somebody saw something that wasn't in the report, it was kind of like the time for alibis. Like, okay, here's the situation report. Am I missing anything that's important that we need to send up? And when I first noticed there was a problem, I'd read the situation report, and besides just having pain and stuff like that, that's just a thing. But when I noticed cognitively, like, there's a problem, is when I was putting the situation reports together, and the guys would be, no, hey, Sergeant Cutler, that's all the information is correct, but it's out of order. I was like, what do you mean it's out of order? Because that didn't happen before. So I was getting things out of order, and I was missing details, and something was wrong, just wrong. And so from that point, we started doing the situation report together. And I didn't want to alarm the guys because I really did feel like I was okay. And I don't think that's a prideful thing. I don't think that's a unique thing. I think anybody who's deployed, you just don't punch out unless you're missing body parts. Just don't. And you don't, because the worst thing for me would not be to be hurt. The worst thing for me would be to be hurt, to leave, and then somebody else get hurt, and I wasn't there. And I think that's a common sentiment as well. So basically, I just adjusted to the situation, and we did the situation report together so I could keep everything in order and make sure nothing was missed. And it was a bunch of little tweaks like that. And then towards the end of the tour, and then I got hurt again. It just happens. I mean, I don't think anybody deployed and kinetically was involved in a war that didn't get bumps and bruises and scrapes and concussions and, stuff like that. Ultimately, we got our replacements come in for right seat, left seat ride. And when they came in, then I punched out. And then I went to Walter Reed and spent 2 years there dealing with all the bullshit.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. That's the thing about, the PTS, the wound, if you will. Many times, myself as a TBI non-combat accident that I had that actually was a DUI, where I received a head trauma, and you don't see that, and it is cognitively and emotionally, it can be a grab bag of bullshit. And with me personally, it took me nearly losing everything in my life to finally pull it all back together. And when you put it like that, and you say dealing with the bullshit, and it's tough. You might not be missing a limb, but that concussive effect can really play havoc with your mindset. And for me, 42 years of hiding a dirty, dark secret came out, man, with my head injury. And it took me a while to put it back. So, you're putting it back together, and that's when you start writing your book. And tell us about the book.
Well, for one, let me underline what we already know, what you just kind of said. At that time in 2005, nobody was talking about blast wave injuries. And when I was injured, no helmet, on the fob, on the base, and I could tell you it was intense. I mean, it was when I say rang my bell, that's not that is an under exaggeration. It was rough. It was intense. But again, I was more happy that I wasn't missing body parts and everything was okay. I felt like I got lucky more than I felt like I got hurt. And then when I started getting the effects of that blast wave injury, because the blast wave, goes through your brain, it just tears the neurons and fibers, things that connect things to other things that make everything work well. And that was the major problem. And then, at Walter Reed, then it was time to kind of to unwind all that and figure out what was going on. At the same time, they were dealing with, repairing injuries to my leg, repairing injuries to my shoulder, repairing injuries, just trying to fix things in my neck, just trying to fix all these little things. At the same time, you're right, PTSD, that was definitely a factor in the whole thing, but I was not willing to accept it. I mean, the first time I saw a doctor about PTSD, my response to him was, I don't have PTSD. And I just, it wasn't, there was a lot of stigma around it. I came from a family. I was raised around warfighters who had been in Vietnam, my grandfather. And when the topic of PTSD came up, PTSD was associated with weakness. And so when they were talking to me about, I was probably me and the mentality at the time when someone said PTSD, I would emotionally revolt against that concept. Is like, that's just not possible. That's just not possible. And so it took me a good long time to kind of come to terms with, understanding what PTSD was, what the effects was, and also separating and trying to determine what the effects of PTSD were, as opposed to, blast wave injuries that have really jacked up my brain at the time, that ultimately resulted in central sleep apnea, Parkinson's, dementia. All these things happened. There's true brain damage. So when you got brain damage in someone and you're trying to unravel what PTSD is, it's wow. It's a motherfucker, man.
It is. And that's putting it sweetly. It is, man. It's multi-layered. It's emotional. It can be physical. The whole 9 yards. And then that's when you wrote your autobiography and you started on it. Did you do that because you had to tell the story, and was it therapeutical? And obviously, it's yes to all of that. But tell us about the book, man.
The book was a coping strategy, or it started that way. I started writing the book in Iraq. What happened is I had gone home on leave. I got hurt in August. This was the month I got hurt. And I got hurt in August. And I was dealing with August and September. I was dealing with trying to figure, like, why the fuck can't I, the memory issues were an issue. Getting things in and out of order, things like that was a problem. But now I've asked my team since then, like, hey, when we were outside the wire, was I okay then? They're like, outside the wire, you were golden. There was no problem. Everything was great. But just coming, being able to relay what happened, and that, then it was a problem. So I was dealing with these issues. And so what I started doing is I started taking the situation reports and I started writing stories to different pieces of the situation reports that I would read constantly over and over and over again, to keep the narrative of what was happening in my mind so I wouldn't miss things. And it was me writing the stories from the situation reports that turned into the book. And I didn't realize I was actually writing a book. But when I was home on leave in October, there was a friend of mine that I had met and I had lunch with, and he was an author. He had written a book. And he was asking me about Iraq, and I was telling him about the situation. I was telling him all the stories and all what was going on with the people. And he's like, wow, I think if more people knew what you just said, there'd be more support for the war. And which was important for me because like I come, and a lot of guys, you come home and you're home on leave, you turn on the news and they start telling the stuff that's happening, and you're involved in this stuff. And then everybody wants to give their opinion, and their opinion is, should we get out? Should we stay? All this other stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, you guys have no idea what you're even talking about in order to give your opinion about get out, leave, stay? Did we do the right thing? That's all fine and dandy, but let me tell you about a raid 3 nights ago where X, Y, and Z happened, and it was good, and it helped these. It very much frustrated me watching the news when I came home on leave listening to people's opinions that were all based on bullshit. I mean, total fucking bullshit. It was like, how can you even you think you have an opinion that's educated, but it's really not.
To put that into context, what Boone's saying here, we had interviewed a female public affairs officer, and she said that they were only reporting 3% of good news. Everything else was supposed to be, like you just said, bullshit. Report the bad stuff that's happening or things that aren't really true. And that's kind of scary, man, when you think that the media is that slanted. But sorry, man, I just wanted to say that because it's true.
No, it was absolutely true. And so when my buddy said, you should write a book, I think there would be more support for the war. To me, that felt like I'd never written a book. I mean, I didn't know how to do that. That was, I wasn't exactly great at high school, so writing a book was like beyond anything I thought I could even do.
Well, why Voodoo? Why Voodoo? Why the name Voodoo? Tell us that. What's going on there?
That was our call sign.
Okay, there you go. So it's deeper than that, but there's got to be like a second meaning there or something.
well, Voodoo, Voodoo is the generic term or the colloquial term for psychological operations. And so Voodoo in Sadr City was our call sign, but it's also talking about psychological operations in Sadr City. And so that's why it became Voodoo in Sadr City. It wasn't about me. It was about the types of operations and the team that was doing it. And which is since, by the end of this year, I would say anybody interested in the book, don't go get it. Wait till the end of this year. And I'm coming out with call sign Voodoo, which is a lot more palatable. People will get more out of it. So just hold off, wait and get call sign Voodoo. And that's the other reason why I changed the name to call sign Voodoo instead of Voodoo in Sadr City, because people didn't know what they were like. Why is there voodoo in Iraq? They took it literally, and I think it was a little distracting. But when I decided to write the book, it was cool because the guy I was having lunch with goes, I said, I don't know how to write a book. He goes, it's the easiest thing in the world. Let me show you this technique, and he showed me this quick technique on how to organize a book, and I was like, yeah, I can totally do that. So when I got back to Iraq, I started organizing my notes and organizing all these situations that were happening at the same time and kind of overlapping. I started organizing them as I was writing them. And literally the book that I wrote was the information that I had to keep straight in my own head because I had been injured. Had I not got injured, I would have never written the book because I wouldn't have needed to.
Well, we're glad that you did. Sorry you had to go through that, but that book in and of itself, there's, you as you describe it, I was thinking of a quote that somebody told me a long time ago. This is just a detractor here, but the happiest people I have known have been those who gave themselves no concern about their own souls, but did their uttermost to mitigate the miseries of others. That's Elizabeth Stanton. And it's kind of interesting because how you described the process of dealing with concussives and the stuff that you were dealt and how you put it in the story form. That's how I feel about a guy like you. Even though you had to go through that, you're one of the happiest guys I know because you're doing things that actually are making shit happen for people, and you're helping them with no regard for your own soul, even though it's therapeutic. That. But man, I got to tell you, Boone, you put yourself out there, and the impact that you've had on reducing the miseries of others is quite phenomenal. And I just applaud you for that. Anyhow, that's just a sidebar, but thank you for that. That you reminded me of that quote, and you may not feel like you're very happy, but I personally think that the things that you're doing only comes from a person deep inside that's happy. And you've found a way, man, to make your miseries into something actually pretty beautiful to help others. So thank you for that. Anyhow, so you're writing the book. You got a new book coming out. So anybody listening, wait till the new book, call sign Voodoo, comes out. So you get out, and I'm telling you, man, you have a powerful freaking drive. You get on the radio. You're doing so many things to help the warfighters. What an incredible mission, man. Tell us about the radio show and how you got started, and just tell us about that, man. How did you get that thing going?
Well, I was at Walter Reed for 2 years, and it was during the neglect scandal, and all that stuff went into the book. And because I wrote the book in country, and then when I got out of country, I wrote about being in the hospital. And I hadn't seen anybody really talk about, being in the hospital and what that was like, and the zombie dope, the amount of medications that we were put on, and it was a chemical prison at the time. And as I understand, it's gotten better. And I don't think anybody was necessarily trying to offer less than standard of care at the time we were going through that. I just think there was an inordinate amount of injured and wounded that they just didn't know how to deal with. There was just, I don't think they expect as many people to survive at the time of the war, because at that time, unlike other wars, you could be at a level 1 trauma unit in very short time, from the battlefield. And so guys were recovering, or not recovering, but surviving injuries that they wouldn't normally have survived. And because of the amount of explosives that were being used as weapons, in theater, there was a lot of trauma. There's a lot of head trauma, and so they were dealing with injuries that America as a country has not dealt with in previous wars in the numbers that they had. And so the result of that was there weren't enough doctors, there wasn't enough room, there was a lot of injuries, and they had at their disposal drugs, and they used those drugs, and they used a lot of those drugs, and that created another effect on top of everything. So, and then the suicide rate was just astronomical. And when everybody was screaming, like, well, I don't know how this could possibly happen, I was like, I know exactly how this is happening. And so I felt very compelled to tell that story. And I started going on different radio shows to basically pimp out the book. And so I was on a local radio station in Reno, 99.1 FM, and we did the interview, and the show went good. And then the guy who ran the station told me I did a good job. He was very polite. And I said, well, that's good. I said, give me a job. And he's like, what? I said, no, seriously, give me a job. And I said, meet me tomorrow for lunch, and I'll explain to you why you should give me a job. And he did. He went for it. And so we met, and we sat down, we had a conversation. I explained how nobody in the media represents the warfighter community. Everybody, unless you get like Ollie North, who gets on the TV for 2 minutes to talk about an issue, or they have some other military advisor that comes on, they give them 2 minutes, and that's it. I said, I want to have a show that is nothing but the warfighter perspective. And I want to call it Tipping Point with Boone Cutler, based on the Malcolm Gladwell book. And so, because I really felt like the warfighter community would get to a tipping point that it would change other things in the country, but we could not get to that tipping point unless we had a rally point first where we could come together. So that's what Tipping Point with Boone Cutler was all about. It was about being a rally point, and it was about understanding and telling, not just, it was allowing America to be a fly on the wall, to listen to the warfighter perspective as warfighters spoke to each other. Like you and I are speaking to each other right now. This didn't exist. All these podcasts, all this stuff, none of that existed. It was non-existent in 2011. And so, and I had gotten well, that was 3 years after I got out of the hospital. The hospital was 2 years, then it took me another 3 years to get better from being in the hospital. This was a long journey. So as I'm doing this warfighter perspective, national, international, or social issue with this show, I'm going through stuff myself. I'm getting off the zombie dope. I'm learning about CBD. I'm learning about cannabis. And as I was learning about it, I was learning about it on air.
Which is phenomenal, and which is, there you go. That's that's a huge victory. And talking about being out in front, and you're right. Podcast media didn't really exist back in 2011. Some of these subjects were deemed maybe too irresponsible or too over the top. People didn't really want to hear. And then we find out the post-traumatic stress doesn't just affect warfighters, it affects people. You go through a divorce or you go through an accident like I did, or other things, financial ruin, or losing your dream job, or being bullied or sexually assaulted. I mean, you guys were on the cutting edge. It opened all of that up to the discussion, and you did, Boone. You guys made it. It's an international discussion now. So kudos to you. You know, and I know you're not done, man, but let me ask you this, looking back on it, is there anything you would have changed, or would you do it all over again?
I can't say there was anything I would, if I was in the condition I am now, I probably would have made some different decisions because I know more about media, but at the time, it was just a slugfest, man. And there was even a time when I first started in radio that it was more like my angry therapy session, because that's what it was. It was my angry therapy session. And I started that way. So that was me at that time in that environment doing, just slugging it out. But, what I know now, and there's been more healing. I mean, I've gotten off all the zombie dope. I've gotten off all the pain meds and that I had to go through. I mean, I did all that on air and found CBD on air and started using cannabis, not on air, but I started using cannabis for sleep, during the same time frame. I mean, it's legal in Nevada now, but at the time, I was the guy that was, trying to hook up with my dealer at the Del Taco. I mean, I was doing literally, it was like survival mode, and I wasn't afraid to tell about it. Like when I started talking about cannabis in 2010, it was crickets, man.
Well, that's what I'm saying, man. You guys opened up the lid, man, for guys like me. That honestly, CBD saved my life, man. If I didn't have those in my recovery nonsense that I went through, actually not nonsense, but if I didn't have CBDs, there's a good chance I might not even be here myself. So thank you, man. So let me ask you this. So where's Boone Cutler in 5 years? What's the vision, man? Where do you see yourself?
Well, I'm going to be doing a lot of the same things I am right now, and there's some other media opportunities I'm not going to get into right now, but everybody should pay attention because I think there's going to be some very big things happening, and it's not going to be more of the same. It's going to be bigger stuff because now I want to bring a lot of attention to stem cell therapy. I want to bring more attention to not just CBD, but other cannabinoids. I want to bring attention to future hemp industries because full-on industries that are going to be created around hemp that can change things. And, we want to be able to take care of I've had stem cell therapy. My heart went out, a year ago, and I had to go down to Panama. I got stem cell therapy for my heart. It saved my life. I would have been dead in April otherwise. And so as part of getting the stem cell therapy, it didn't just help my heart, but it helped other, service-connected issues that I've had. The TBI is totally different. The Parkinson's is gone. I don't have Parkinson's anymore, and that's dealing with life. And people don't understand, but there's a behavioral, there's a cognitive, there's a psychological, emotional effects that things like dementia and Parkinson's do to people. I mean, they have psychological effects, emotional effects, and to go through a stem cell therapy for my heart because I was going to die, but also reap the benefit on having on the brain injury changing. I'm not going to say it's gone because one of the things it has done is it's changed to the point that now I realize how bad my memory is, where before it was bad enough that I didn't realize. So now I'm dealing with those effects, but sharing that story on, hey, stem cells can help traumatic brain injury. Stem cells can help other service-connected related injuries. So we don't have to be on the drugs. So we can actually heal instead of just,
masking,
deal with the problem in a chemical way. We can actually heal. And the combination, and this is one thing I guess I can't put my finger on directly because I was trying to hunt and pecking to find out how I'm going to answer your question. One, you're going to see bigger media. Two, I'm going to be talking more and more about things that folks. I always try and get in front of things so I can create the conversation within our community, and the conversation between the effectiveness of using CBD or cannabinoids and stem cells together is phenomenal. And that conversation is going to get louder and continue to grow, and people can be better served by that. So the things that I've done, I'm my own guinea pig. I'm the guinea pig. I go through it.
Man, it's building up.
Yeah, I go through it and I tell other people about it. That's what I do. What do I do in life? I explain things. That's all I do. I just explain things.
Well, what do you want? And I know you've been doing this for a while, and I know this message is out there. What do you want the non-veteran population, the non-military population to know about veterans, and especially combat veterans? There's such a negative freaking stereotype out there that everybody's, hair triggers and the deal. There's just the media plays it up too. What do you want the people to really know about combat veterans?
Well, I think that if we just stay on the path that we're on right now, we'll continue to get better. In 2000 and like I said, 2010, there was so much PTSD phobia. 46% of human resources managers at that time said it was difficult to hire a veteran for a job because of PTSD. 46%. Imagine that. That's almost half. Half of you. And they didn't know anything about PTSD. That's where the whole thing was just crazy. It was what they thought they knew about PTSD. That was the PTSD phobia. So guys were not being able to get jobs. They were not being able to find places to live. They're being excluded from education opportunities because they would go into academia, and there was this PTSD phobia, which created more isolation. And again, these entities didn't even know what PTSD was. They had this Hollywood version of PTSD, which is a psychotic break. That's not PTSD. That's what a psychotic break looks like. They're two different things. And so at that time, it was becoming more isolation. But here's what's so beautiful, and I want to give so much credit to our community, because we really have saved our own lives. At a time when there was all this PTSD phobia, we were becoming isolated, but then we went from our isolation to finding ourselves in groups. And guys were starting to go out and do ruck marches. Guys were starting to get together for barbecues. And it was basically the same path that the VSOs, the Veteran Service Organizations, had jumped on, decades and decades before, except our community was doing it together in smaller pods, maybe less formalized pods, but nonetheless, we coalesced as a group. And our community is a group now. We are an aggregate that some people try to exploit, that some people try to use it as just a conduit for information. But, in the last 9 years, we have found ourselves. We have found a place. We have found an identity. I have to give credit to all the guys that have been making T-shirts out there, and all the folks that have been, starting Warfighter-owned businesses, because those little things became symbols for our group, our entity, and our identity. They're very, very important. So, there were no podcasts. There were just some smaller T-shirt companies back in 2009. I mean, now they're huge, and everybody's got a podcast, which is great. And so in 9 years, our community created an identity for itself.
Absolutely.
And I think that is only going to get better, because the beautiful thing is that guys getting out of the military today, they come into a community that they can bitch about. And the reason that's beautiful is because they have the ability to bitch about it, because 9 years ago, there was nothing that existed that they could bitch about.
You're so you're so correct, and kudos to you on that, because that is, it's groundbreaking, it's cutting edge, it's helping and giving back to the community. So, that being said, there's a couple more questions, man. We could do this for a while, but let me, so there's a brother or sister making the transition. They're isolated. They're in that bad freaking place. They're not doing too well. And based on your own personal experience and all the BS that you've had to go through, and forging your way to creating this world, what advice can you give them?
Battle buddy and a mission. The Spartan Pledge. The Spartan Pledge, it belongs to the community for a reason. It's because it is our ethos turned on its head that applies itself to a warfighter living in a civilian world. It's the Spartan Pledge. The Spartan Pledge, if you follow the two parts of the Spartan Pledge, it's game on. There really is nothing you're not going to be able to accomplish, because for one, and let's talk about the Spartan Pledge. The first part is, I will not take my own life by my own hand until I talk to my battle buddy first. The second part is, my mission is to find a mission to help my warfighter family. It's two sentences. Well, the first part of the pledge is, one, you're not going to kill yourself. And if that's really a thing that's on your mind, before you do it, you have to talk to your battle buddy first. And I find that as soon as that happens, it turns off the switch. And then as soon as that happens and you talk to your battle buddy, now one has become two. And remember, in the military, two is one and one is none. So as soon as you find yourself in a situation of two, you're already better. The second part of the Spartan Pledge, my mission is to find a mission to help my warfighter family. Now you're creating two into a group, a much bigger group. And the purpose of the group is to help each other. And once you have those two things, then you have everything you need to accomplish a mission. And a warfighter with a mission is a deadly warfighter, but a warfighter without a mission is a dead warfighter. So if I'm going to offer any information to anybody who's getting off active duty today, going into the civilian world, follow the Spartan Pledge. If you actually do and commit to it, and that's our community does. When we take a pledge, it's just a very serious thing. It's just not words. We know we have to follow through on it. So if you find your way to that Spartan Pledge and actually, take it to heart, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And not only will you be okay, but you're going to help countless others.
Definitely phenomenal work and a phenomenal message. And, one of the best and most useful tips any veteran, especially combat veterans, can take. What does freedom mean to you, Boone?
Well, I'm going to answer that question in a non-political way. I'm going to answer, personally. Freedom is the ability for me to be able to make decisions in a healthy way that aren't forced by drugs, by doctors, by some civilian idyllic mentality. For me, freedom is the ability to be the warfighter that I am in a civilian environment. And whether it's accepted or not, it's fine. That's fine. I could still do it. I could still be honest about it. And I'm not going to be persecuted for it.
Very well said. Tell me the Boone Cutler mantra. What's the mantra? Do you have a quote or your own quote that you live by?
Fighters fight.
Well, there you go. And even though that's two words, it's probably two of the most powerful words in the warfighter community, and that can be taken to a lot of different places, but that's a bond that they cannot take away. And, how do people get in touch with Boone Cutler?
Oh, golly, they always find a way.
It could be a bad thing. I know it's all good, man.
No, it's all good. I appreciate, if you see me at events, you'll see me on social media. I'll post up where different places I'm going to be. Never be shy about saying hello. I love it when people check in and just say, "Hey, Boone, I wanted to say hi. My name is so-and-so." And, I love that. I love pressing the flesh and just being close to other warfighters. And I love doing interviews and talking to people and having the conversation. I think everything starts with a word. And from a word, we have a conversation, and that develops meaning. So if there's someone out there that is trying to get in touch with me, there's a time and a place it'll happen, and we'll share words. We'll have a conversation. We'll develop meaning.
Well, I appreciate that. And I got to tell you from the bottom of my heart, man, I'm glad that we finally connected, and I'm glad that I was able to get with you on this interview at Straight Outta Combat Radio. And, there's people out there that you don't know personally, but I can assure you that you've helped hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people with your message and your story, Boone, with what you went through. And all I can say is you're a testimony to your granddad and to your dad and to all of those war fighters and veterans, even non-combat veterans have an appreciation for that appreciate guys like you with the leadership and the drive and the freaking headspace to help others. And anytime you can help others, and especially in that community, you're doing valuable deeds for the planet. I don't say that lightly. And when I say him, I mean him. And I'm just humbled and honored to have Boone Cutler on our show today. So thank you for being here and for telling your story. And I look forward to when we can press some flesh at some event somewhere in this great land of ours.
No, the honor is mine, brother. Thank you very much for what you're doing. It's good. It's amazing. And it's what needs to be done.
Well, thank you. You set the path, man. We're on mission. I love you, man.
All the way, brother.
You gotta light 'em up before they burn it down.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine from Green Zone Hero. If you liked what you heard, then tell others about us. Like us and download us. And please remember, freedom is not free, and combat veterans are vital assets. They're not broken.
Save us all before they burn it down.